All right, hello. We are back with part 4. I just got off the FaceTime, the phone FaceTime, that thing, the app, where I could see Rob Hardy's face and we were chatting. And he reminded me I need to get back to this. So here we are. Still don't know what the fuck the pattern is because I haven't got there yet. He's done an incredible job of hiding that from me as a reader. So good job, but also fuck you, Rob. um, I have been alerted to the fact that Rob wants to. Never mind. I will not say that stuff. That's private. So anyway, here we are, part 3. How much? I'm not even fucking halfway through this thing, but we're gonna go. Maybe I'll go for longer today. How many? What time is it? 3:18. I've got to get. I have a shift 30 call in just under 3 hours. So I got plenty of time. So, all right. Part 3: The Tyranny of Freedom. I've never been much of a New Year's resolutions guy. But as the clock struck midnight and 2014 came to an end, I knew I needed an exit plan from the filmmaking blog. The money was great, but thanks to the pattern, I was dead inside. So I resolved to escape. Over the next few months of 2015, I started laying groundwork. I took a few courses on copywriting. I learned the nuts and bolts of freelancing. And most importantly, I started my own online business aimed at indie filmmakers. My plan was to use freelancing income to give me the time and space required to build something real, meaningful, and good. I was intent on breaking the pattern and finally doing work I could be proud of. Interestingly, this was the same period of time, 2014, 2015, when I kind of took the opposite tack, and this speaks to my own sense of like self-assurance or lack of it at the time, where Rob, you went and started your own thing and was doing freelancing. That was always my aspiration, but I was compelled by this idea that I should go like apprentice myself and become an employee in a like a direct response powerhouse kind of organization to put myself around like long time senior copywriters in the field. So I went that direction. That's what I've been doing ever since. So I mean, honestly, and I've told you this directly, but like, props to you for having the fortitude and the wherewithal and the self assurance to go your own way with it. That's what I always wanted. That's what I wanted from the very, very beginning. I was just too scared to do that, so I went and I got a job, and so that I didn't have to figure all these things out and not know what the next step was all the time. And that's been fine for me. I mean, it's not always been fun to say the least, but that's been my path. So interesting, yeah. We like at the very same time went down two different paths within the same world. So, and I guess my idea, though it never really happened, was that I was wanting to use my income from my jobs as a copywriter and a marketer to build something real, meaningful, and good. I never did that because I never, until very recently, got to the point where feeling like I wasn't just a fucking fraud at the very foundation of everything. So the as much as I wanted to, I never could get myself to like go beyond the job that I was doing and put myself out there. So again, very inspired by the fact that you were doing that at the same time that I was explicitly not. And just like that, I was on the path towards freedom, or so I thought. Back in those days, my understanding of the pattern was still fairly limited. I pinned the blame on certain business models. More specifically, I thought advertising poisoned everything it touched and inevitably led to bad incentives along with a flood of mediocre media. So, in my first business, I opted to monetize through products and services. In my case, I started creating online courses for filmmakers, and later on, I started coaching. In theory, that should have created the proper incentives to do thoughtful, long form writing. I think I've been through that, feeling like advertising ruins everything that it touches. It's pretty fucking crazy how deep the advertising rabbit hole goes and how pervasive of a force it is in the world in general. There's so many different ways you could take it, but like just a week or two ago, I was riding the metro or whatever in a downtown of a big American city, and it's full of billboards and on the inside, and some of them were saying literally, or there were signs saying like these advertising spaces play a huge role in allowing the public transportation of the city to be as cheap as it is. It's like, wow, okay, so the fact that I can just hop on the train so easily and it costs me very, very little is in many ways thanks to advertising and the whole economic system within which that exists. So it's interesting to start pulling on that thread and be like, wow, what if the regulations for advertising were radically different? What if advertising wasn't allowed in that context, for example? Like, what if public transportation couldn't be funded in any way by putting up advertising space, right? That's also like part of how newspapers came into being, to the degree that they are like spread everywhere. It's like they sell ad space, and so otherwise someone would have had the money, someone would have needed the money to just fund the entire project themselves. But if they sell ad space, then they can make money from advertisers, and so that allows people to publish newspapers and various other things that otherwise they wouldn't have the economic capacity for. So it's all very mixed up, and I'm not saying anything new to people who are in that world, but yeah, it's just interesting to think about how complex and pervasive it is. As to whether it's a poison, I don't know. Sometimes it definitely is. Okay. And indeed, in my first year running that business, I published a few pieces that I am still proud of to this day. But beneath the surface, an even sneakier, more pernicious variation of the pattern was taking root and sinking its claws into me. Because it turns out, the pattern has little to do with business models and everything to do with our collective inability to grapple with insecurity, ambiguity, uncertainty, and fear. I like where this is going. You know that. You know I like where this is going. It's fascinating to me to think about how you've written this, where the pattern is sinking its claws into you, right? It's like externalized. Which can be a very, very, very good way of conceiving of this kind of thing and presenting it as an idea and dealing it within your own mind. Like sometimes you really need to externalize these things. But I think, and we'll see how this manifesto keeps going, but like there also can be a lot of value in thinking of it not as this external thing, but as an internal thing, right? It's not sinking its claws into you, it's just part of you. And it's so anyway, maybe there's like a version of the manifesto that's rather than externalizing the pattern, seeing it as this internal thing, right? And I mean, you say it right here: our collective inability to grapple with insecurity, ambiguity, uncertainty, and fear. Like, what would this manifesto look like if it wasn't about the collective at all? What if it was simply about your journey and your experience and your inability or ability over the course of your life to grapple with insecurity, ambiguity, uncertainty, and fear? That would be a really fascinating story. And obviously some of that is in here, but it's not exactly written in that way, at least so far. I mean, but I was right. Like the reason why I went and I took a job as a copywriter rather than becoming a freelancer as I hoped was, yeah, I had fucking insecurity, ambiguity, uncertainty, and fear, and I didn't know how to grapple with that stuff. So I found the most secure path that I could. All right, back to it. In my case, I quickly learned that freelancing isn't an easy or glamorous way to make a living. Feast or famine is the norm, especially for new freelancers. There are periods where it's going great, you've got enough clients, and your bank account is full. There are also periods of near destitution, where new clients are nowhere to be found and old ones won't return your emails. I vacillated between these two extremes throughout 2016 and 2017, and I was constantly excuse me, and I was constantly in a state of financial scarcity. You know, interestingly, I didn't go through that, obviously, because I got a job, and yet I too was constantly in a state of financial scarcity, right? And that's, you can talk about scarcity in terms of like, I don't know, objective is a very weird thing to say when it comes to money, but like there's also this just the subjective experience of your own relationship to money. And like you could be making fine money, you could be making a salary and fucking royalties on top of that salary and still feel deeply insecure about your financial situation, as I have for many, many years. So it's interesting to read that, you know, despite me having chosen the more stable path, stable objectively or stable in terms of like doing a job doesn't necessarily mean that you're saving yourself from insecurity. Not at all. Or me. It wasn't the case for me. I still was deeply, deeply insecure and uncertain and felt extreme scarcity despite making money. During those periods of financial insecurity, I started putting increasing amounts of pressure on my online business. It was no longer acceptable to take my time and play the long game with it. I needed it to pay off big and as quickly as possible. This desire for short-term results led me directly into the arms of the online marketing industrial complex and into a reincarnated version, zombie version, of the pattern. Yeah, I mean, again, this online marketing industrial complex, yeah, that's a real thing. We literally were talking about it on the phone earlier today. Um, and even though I took a job, which in a sense was like, okay, I'm gonna play this a little bit more long game. That didn't save me from still feeling constantly this pressure for it to be short term. And in some ways, it kind of like fucked me up even more because I was like, what am I doing? Like, how pathetic is this? Like, I know what I want, but I'm too fucking scared to actually go do it. And so I was like constantly being like, fuck, I should be doing something outside of my job. I should be making something. I should be doing something like Rob was doing. Obviously I didn't know you at the time, but it was very unacceptable to me to simply be working the job. And yet that's all I was doing because I was too scared to go beyond that. So in a way, yeah, like from the outside I was playing the long game, but from the inside it didn't feel like I was playing the long game at all. And I put so much pressure on myself. I spent mucho dinero. I spent a lot of money on programs and advice about becoming a freelancer and becoming independent. And it didn't happen. I spent a lot of money towards that dream without ever making that dream a reality. But every time I spent that money, it did feel like, it's gonna like, I'm gonna put my skin in the game. Now it's like I'm forcing myself to do it because I just spent $2,000 on like how to become a freelancer, and now I better fucking do it, right? Because I worked hard for that $2,000, and if I don't do it, then I fucking wasted that $2,000. So there would be like all this extra pressure on me, right? And that happened over and over and over again, where it's like, fuck, I spent this amount of money feeling like I would finally do it, and then I didn't do it. And then there's even more pressure and more shame because like I didn't do it before, but I still want to do it. How fucking pathetic am I? And then you do it again, and it doesn't happen, and you feel even more fucking pathetic if you don't work through that stuff. Just over and over and over again, until, as has been being talked about on Twitter recently, you feel like you need a fucking course literally to just complete the courses that you've bought and haven't completed, right? But you're in the same fucking pattern. And you're gonna then buy a course about completing the courses you haven't completed, and then you're not gonna complete that one, and then there's gonna be another course being like, here, let me this course is all about you completing the other course that you bought, which is about completing all the other courses that you never completed. But if you never work through the shit that's making you buy courses over and over and over again, it's not gonna change. Anyway, I kind of got off track. If you've spent any time exploring the worlds of online business and marketing, you know the space is overflowing with gurus and hucksters promising to teach you the secrets of building a successful business. Just follow my simple 5-step formula, they'll tell you, and you'll be making 6 figures and sipping daiquiris on a tropical beach 90 days from now. Or, in more subtle forms, they'll say things like, your business is not successful yet because you're not using, and then they'll fill in the blank with some flavor of the month marketing tactic. guest blogging, Facebook ads, chatbots, high-ticket sales, evergreen launches, email automation, and on and on and on. Yep, been through the ringer with that shit. I'm actually not going to name any names. That's unnecessary. But yeah, books, courses, free email automation, fucking, what's it called? Autoresponders. Trying to learn, how to make 10 grand a month in the next 90 days. Been through that. I consider myself a fairly savvy guy with with a healthy dose of skepticism towards scammy nonsense that seems too good to be true. My mama didn't raise no fool. But here's the thing. When I'm in a state of financial insecurity, it's like my brain gets hijacked. I go into survival mode and start looking for anything, even deeply irrational things, that'll make me feel safe and like I'm in control. So in those early years of my business, when I was in a constant state of not enough, I whipped out my overtaxed credit card more times than I cared to admit. And I would even say that we have continued to do that even in the later years. Have we not? I say that for both of us. And it's a weird thing being somebody who's also making things to sell online, right? And it's like, okay, well, do you want to feed this? Do you want to communicate with people in a way that leads them to whip out their overtaxed credit card again for your thing? That's a really uncomfortable question. I've always been really, really, really resistant to that. And that's partly why I've not wanted to do my own thing. And it's partly why I've even felt so uncomfortable helping to sell other people's things, is because I felt like I was just pushing that. I was pushing people, or I was pushing situations where people would be doing exactly what you just described, being in a state of financial insecurity, feeling like this thing that I'm involved in selling is going to save them, right? And I know, because I've been through it and I've seen other people go through it, it's not going to save them. And that really eats at you. It eats at me fucking deeply. And I can attribute a lot of my burnout to doing that over and over and over again. Of I'm marketing this thing, but I also know that not everyone is gonna go through it. Not everyone is gonna succeed or have any of their problems solved. A vast majority of them are not. A vast majority of the people who buy things are just going to have bought it and then never even open it. We talked about this today too. Even at the high levels of online marketing, when we were talking about really fucking seasoned, extremely skilled copywriters, extremely skilled marketers and media buyers and all this stuff, 2 to 3% conversion rate is good. So that means more than 90% of the people who ever see your ads are not even going to look at it. So then, let alone the people who do buy, it's the same fraction again. I mean, I don't know exactly, but it's a similar thing. Only a very, very small percentage of the people who actually buy even open it, let alone go through it all the way, And it's disheartening. But if I think about my own experience as a buyer, yeah, I only like one out of a billion courses that I've ever taken have I gone all the way through. Okay. Wasting money on courses is one thing, but I took what I learned in those courses and injected it straight into my fledgling business. I followed the best practices. I ran the playbooks. I trusted the experts. I started creating lead magnets, building funnels, writing long, pressure filled sales pages. The writing on my blog became more focused on driving traffic, growing my list, and demonstrating that I, too, was an expert. None of it felt particularly aligned with how I wanted to show up in the world. In fact, a lot of it felt kind of scummy, but the clock was ticking. I had bills to pay, and I wanted to reach my desired state of financial freedom sooner rather than later. Yep. What else is there to say? But yeah, been there. And that I would say that a lot of the people who are those guys that we buy from are similar, you know? Not always, but some of them are in a similar position. They're bigger than us, but they're also paying out their ass for like all, all of the services and software and freelancers and all the shit that they need to run their business, right? So it's like, yeah, they might be making $1 million a year, but they're spending like all of it. So they gotta keep going in the same way that you were and that I was. That's definitely a thing that I've learned to always keep in mind when people flash like revenue numbers. It's like well, yeah, the one thing is like, are we talking gross or are we talking net? Because you might have grossed $1 million, but how much did you actually walk away with? Because if you walked away with zero, you're just in just as much of a scarce, urgent position as me. Even if I only made $100, you need to make money again because you have zero. All right. None of these best practices worked half as well as promised, nor as quickly. But I'm stubborn as hell, and I kept at it. And after 3 years, I did not need freelancing anymore. My little business covered all of my living expenses. I was ostensibly free. But much in the same way the luster of the filmmaking blog had worn off after the first year, so too was I disillusioned with the business I'd built. Sure, I was making an okay living, but I was fucking miserable. I'd gone all in on the things I was supposed to do, adding value, building funnels, launching courses, the whole 9 yards. And it all left me feeling empty, deflated, and uninspired. And I'm not the only one. Yeah, a lot there that I can say I relate to, that I've said some of those exact same words many times in the last decade. But also, one thing that occurred to me in this first sentence, right, about these things not working as well or as quickly as promised, that's an interesting thing to say because, or it's an interesting idea to think about because everyone's coming to those and using those in different circumstances. Everyone's doing it in such different ways. Even if you're trying to apply it by the book, you're doing it in a different way internally, right? Like maybe someone's doing it because they feel inspired. Maybe someone's doing it because they feel like if they don't do it, like they're gonna die, like they're gonna go broke. Maybe someone feels like it's really scammy, but that's the only way to make money, so they're doing it anyway, and they're really forcing themselves and feel sick to their stomach meanwhile, right? So there's so many different ways that we can use and put these best practices into practice. And so Of course, it's not going to work the same way for everyone, you know? Another whole thing is like the nature of making promises as a marketer, as a person. It's like, how do you feel? Where's your comfort level? It's a more interesting thing to ask, I think, as the person selling, um, because it puts you in the position of having to actually do the thing rather than like get mad at someone for making a promise that didn't come true. It's like, okay, so you have this thing that you want to sell, that you've seen work, that's worked for you, and you know it doesn't work for everyone. So how do you go about making that promise to the world? And it's an open question. There's a lot of ways to approach it, you know? And thinking about that will teach you a lot about your own sense of your relationship to marketing and your relationship to money and your relationship to other people. What you think honesty means. There's no right answer, but you'll learn a hell of a lot by asking yourself that stuff. Okay. Over the last 2 years, I've met so many creators, including outwardly successful ones making a great living, who are unhappy and who feel trapped. They joined the creator economy to pursue a life of freedom and creativity and connection. So they followed all the rules and best practices. They did everything right, yet still ended up constructing a prison for themselves, just as soul-crushing as any day job that preceded it. Many of us try to escape the pattern, only to end up right back in its grips. All right. So I am more than halfway at this point, but I think, can I do this bit? Fuck it, I'll do it. Part 3.5. An explanatory interlude. About time you explained some shit. So far, I've been coy about what the pattern is. And frankly, that's because it's not just one thing. It's a complex, emergent phenomenon, driven by the interplay of several ingredients. Here are a few of the big ones. Yeah, I mean, I've used pattern as I've been like riffing off of your what you're writing, and I'm not using it to say exactly what you've been trying to say. It's a very it's a it's a it can point to a lot of things. Obviously, pattern. It's a very common word, but let's see what you mean by it. An environment of irresistible short-term incentives that blind us to long-term possibility. As humans, we're evolutionarily wired to prioritize short-term gain. Hunter-gatherers had no use for 5-year plans, and those instincts are still within us. Combine that with our current economic system, ad-driven business models, and algorithmic social media platforms, all of which visibly reward cynical short-term games, and you've got the perfect recipe to get a lot of people prioritizing what's easy, quick, and shallow. There's so much opportunity waiting for the people who do deep, meaningful work and who play long games. But our wiring and our current environment make it very difficult to see those possibilities and trust them. I mean, I don't disagree with any of this necessarily, but I do have a little bit of a like devilish, rebellious voice popping up, which is like, is it the incentives that blind us, or are we blind and we don't see because we ourselves, our own perception is so narrowed? Obviously, it's an interplay of you and your environment. So I'm not saying it's like one or the other, and you're saying it's the wrong thing, but I do feel with this article some resistance on my part that there's a lot of externalization of these forces, that it's coming from the outside and we've been victim to it. And like, look, that's not entirely untrue, but also it's not the whole truth. I'm not the biggest fan of um, putting the blame on 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 the people outside and the forces outside of us. Like, I'm right now like doing a lot of fucking whatever shadow work, uh stuff like that, around being one of those scummy, scammy marketer people, and it's proving very fascinating to do. Like, my discomfort with all of that I have lived with for so long, it's not the end of the story. It's not how I have to be always. And what looks scammy from the outside, what feels scammy to somebody, is not like objectively scammy. And sometimes being scammy isn't so bad. Sometimes that's the best thing for the situation. So I don't know. I'm not really selling that very well, but that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. Is like, I'm actually trying to hug those demons, because I've really demonized this shit for a long time. A long time. And I'm trying to hug those demons now and like show them that I don't just fucking hate them, that I don't want to just shove them out of my life. But that, look, those are parts of me too. Those short term insecure incentives, those desires to make a lot of money fast, those desires to build a business that just scoops up money. Those are very real parts of me. Those are very real desires that I've had a long time. And I'm at a point where I'm not really interested in like suppressing that shit anymore and just being ashamed of it and trying to like say, no, I'm not going to be that way. It's like, no, you know what? I'm going to acknowledge that stuff. But anyway, rant over. Part 2. Mimetic desire and rivalry. This is yet another thing that's baked into human nature. Put simply, we want what we perceive others to want. We look around, find the people who appear to be successful and high status, then start playing the same games as them. Often, this happens intuitively, or even subconsciously. If you've ever wondered why so much of the creator economy looks like a pyramid scheme, with course creators who teach other creators how to sell courses to creators who eventually sell their own courses on course creation to other unsuspecting creators, mimesis is at the heart of the matter. Yeah, I mean, you and me are part of that. Let's not forget it. Let's not forget that. I know that you're not forgetting it, but just saying it out loud for posterity. We are part of this. Three, our innate psychological needs around safety, certainty, and control. Creative work and entrepreneurship are, by nature, uncertain. They're also intimately tied to our sense of self-worth. So the danger we perceive, isn't just financial, but existential. Beyond that, safety is a core need for all of us. We crave certainty and love feeling like we're in control. So when crafty marketers offer these feelings to us on a silver platter, most of us, myself included, jump at the opportunity. It eases the tension building up in our head and makes us feel like we've found a cheat code. But in reality, all we've really found is a fast track into the arms of the pattern. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning here, you say creative work and entrepreneurship are by nature uncertain. They are also intimately tied to our sense of self-worth. They are many times, definitely for me, definitely it seems for you, and definitely for a lot of people that I know. But they don't need to be. Creative work and entrepreneurship don't need to be tied to our self-worth. And you can actually untie them. And that is deeply transformative. It's a huge fucking weight off your back. And I would say probably plays a huge role in freeing yourself from the pattern, or at least getting to the point where you can engage with the pattern as you want to rather than compulsively. All right. Put more directly, the pattern is partly about the systems we live in, partly about our innate drive to fit in, compete, and seek status, and partly about wanting to feel secure in an increasingly complex, chaotic world. I'm not naive. The pattern is extraordinarily fucking powerful. It follows us wherever we go because, in fact, it's a reflection of the human condition itself. In Jungian terms, the pattern is an extension of our shadow, those darker parts of ourselves that we shove away and try to ignore. But we can't escape it because it's part of who we are. Beyond that, we can't change our economic systems overnight. We can't change our biological makeup. And we can't reorganize our psyche at the snap of a finger. Breaking the pattern is an uphill battle, and perhaps even a quixotic one. Despite all of that, I believe we can win. In fact, I believe we will win. Okay, I'm just gonna say I don't like the fact that you frame this as a battle. I don't think that's necessary. And hopefully you do away with that metaphor through the rest of this article, but that is one of those metaphors that I hear you use a lot in this article and elsewhere that just locks you into this fighting mode. Battle is you win or you lose. You fucking have opponents that you're trying to kill. It's the battle is right. You're doing internal work. The battle is a fucking horrible metaphor to apply internally. And the metaphors that you apply internally shape how you deal with the outside world. So if you're fighting an uphill battle on the inside, good luck. I really don't. I mean, it's obviously a very pervasive and powerful metaphor, but I really don't believe in it as being useful. So, yeah, right? And talking about winning, we will win. Talk about taking sides in a battle, right? Taking sides and being in a battle are both extremely non-conducive to compassion and no longer feeling like you're at war with everyone all the time, let alone yourself. So I guess I'm kind of leaving on a shitty note, where I disagree with that, or at least where you've left it there. But otherwise, yeah. I mean, this stuff is very familiar. It's very real. They are struggles. Um, but I don't think the answer is to be in a battle with it. Okay, so next time we'll get into part 4, how we win. Hopefully, well, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Those are my last words.